Hi everyone, this is Legacy School Year 7 History, Lesson 28, The Wars of the Roses, Part 1. Our objectives today will be to learn about Henry VI. We will learn about the problems between him and the nobles. We will learn who the Yorkists and the Lancastrians were, and we will understand how the events unfolded in the so-called War of the Roses. We will also learn what the roses, what this word means. We will learn how the Yorkists ruled England. So let's talk a little bit about Henry VI. If you remember, he is the son of the very, very popular and very strong Henry V, the one who won an amazingly famous battle at Agincourt against the French king, and who was supposed to be the first king of France, but met his untimely death. We talked about him earlier. So his son, Henry VI, was far away from his very popular father. He's very famous for becoming the youngest king ever. He was just 9 months old when he got the crown. If you remember, Henry V died of dysentery on the battlefield. He died suddenly, and his very young son was crowned. But of course, he could not rule the country. For 16 years, a so-called royal council governed England for him. Now, during those times, during those years, England was gradually losing most of its territories in France. It was still the time of the 100 Years' War between England and France. Now, when he was 18 years old and he could become a proper king, ruling for himself and by himself, England already lost Normandy. And of course, the noblemen and all the people in England wanted him to take the leadership and go to battle, win back the territories that England lost. But he was not that kind of person. He hated the idea of war. And he was more into going to church and praying and books, basically he was not very popular, and his noblemen thought that he was just simply a coward. On top of that, he showed signs of madness around the age of 20. It started when he was sometimes he couldn't even take care of himself and had to be taken care of as a baby. Now, let's take a look at who the Yorkists and the Lancastrians are. Now, as we mentioned, Henry showed signs of madness more and more often. Because of that, it was absolutely clear he cannot rule England. He cannot have the crown. Now, a group of noblemen wanted to take power, and the most influential from these noblemen was Richard, Duke of York. He was Henry's cousin. Now, in this picture, you can see a lady. This is Queen Margaret, the wife of Henry VI. She was French, Margaret of Anjou. Of course, she could not stand Richard, the Duke of York, and she organized the opposition and later on declared the Duke of York a traitor. So this is how the war broke out in 1459. As a symbol of the two sides, the Yorkists, okay, the followers of the Duke of York, those were the white rose, okay, their symbol was the white rose, and the Lancastrians. So the Lancastrians were the followers of Henry VI and Margaret. Their symbol was the red rose. And of course, their conflict went into history as the War of the Roses. Now, Margaret was an amazingly strong and very clever, very wise woman who was queen and king in one person. She took charge because her husband could not. lead the opposition against the Duke of York. And she was the one who organized the first battle against the Duke of York, which they won in 1460, the Battle of Wakefield. In the same battle, or after the same battle, rather, the Duke was beheaded, but the Londoners did not want Margaret and Henry back. So they did not allow her to enter the town, and Margaret and Henry had to go to the north of England to take refuge. Now, the son of the Duke of York, Edward of York, became king, supported by quite a lot of people in London. He was Edward IV, right? You can see him in the picture. He was a very strong and powerful king. He marched against the Lancastrians and defeated them at the Battle of Towton. And Henry VI and Margaret eventually had to flee to Scotland. Now, Edward IV was a very popular and charismatic leader, but he relied too much on Richard Neville. You can see him in the picture, or also known as the Earl of Warwick. He was the one who helped him get the throne. Now, of course, Edward did not want to be ruled or dictated by the Earl of Warwick. He wanted to be independent. He wanted to rule as an independent king. At the same time, he fell in love with a commoner, Elizabeth Woodville, and a king is not supposed to marry a common woman. A king is supposed to marry a queen, a princess, to forge alliances in Europe. We've mentioned this earlier, that kings and queens were supposed to marry into other royal families. Now, when Edward IV married secretly his love, Elizabeth Woodville, the Earl of Warwick got really, really upset. He turned on him as well and changed sides. He attacked Edward with the Lancastrians and brought back Henry IV for one more year. So changing sides, this created this nickname for him that he was the kingmaker, because he made a king, of course, from Edward IV, and he also made Henry VI again a king. So this is why they called him the kingmaker. Now, Henry VI came back to rule England for only a year, because obviously Edward IV took back his throne. Immediately after that, he mobilized and took back his throne, killed the Earl of Warwick, and Henry VI died in prison. Now, after Edward IV, Edward ruled England when he came back, after he took his throne back. This is again the Yorkist rule. Edward ruled England in relative peace, but unfortunately he died very young after catching cold while fishing, so it was an unfortunate accident. He had two young sons. Edward was the older one. He was 12 years old, and he was supposed to be the next king, the next Yorkist king. Unfortunately, to the princes, the uncle, Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, was named the protector of Edward. Okay, Edward was supposed to be Edward the Fifth. He was supposed to become Edward the Fifth as the next king. The Duke of Gloucester imprisoned the two young princes in the Tower of London and crowned himself. He became Richard III. Please remember the word protector. As you can see, it is highlighted. Protector is a person who rules on behalf of a young king. He didn't want to rule on behalf of a young king. He wanted to be a king himself. Now, of course, stories later on emerged that the princes were killed in the prison, and a lot of people were very unhappy about that, and the War of the Roses resumed after that. Okay, we will be talking about that in our next lesson. Please read pages 70, 71, 72, and 73, and answer the questions that you can see on pages 71 and 73. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.